A remote Scottish archipelago, endless grey skies, a close-knit community with buried secrets going back generations, and a murder rate that should, by any reasonable measure, have emptied the islands years ago. Shetland has been running since 2013, 10 series, based on the novels of the same author who created Vera, and it turned one of the most remote parts of the United Kingdom into one of the most recognizable filming locations in British television. But here's what most fans don't know. Behind the dramatic island scenery and the quiet authority of its lead detectives lies a story more surprising than any case ever solved on screen. A Hollywood-style star installed in tribute to the show and then removed after a dispute, a leading man who walked away at the peak of the show's success, and a real acting dynasty connection that ties Shetland directly to one of the biggest television dramas of the past decade. Stay with us, because the real story of Shetland is more fascinating than the mysteries it solves every single series. Fact 1. It's written by the same author as Vera. Shetland and Vera share more than a passing resemblance. They share a creator. Anne Cleeves, the author whose Vera Stanhope novels became one of ITV's most successful detective dramas, also wrote the Shetland series of novels that inspired this BBC adaptation. Both shows draw on Cleeves' consistent fascination with isolated communities, buried secrets, and detectives whose personal lives are as complicated as the cases they solve. One novelist created two of British television's most internationally successful detective franchises, broadcast on two different networks, featuring two entirely different leads, both drawing audiences in the millions across multiple decades. Fact 2. It was filmed as an answer to Scandinavian crime dramas. When Shetland was first commissioned, British television was in the grip of an obsession with Scandinavian crime drama. The Killing and the Bridge had captivated audiences with their bleak, atmospheric storytelling set against stark Nordic landscapes. The BBC's response was to look closer to home. Shetland, genuinely closer to Norway than to London, offered the same dramatic, weather-beaten atmosphere without leaving British shores. One reviewer noted directly that Shetland was getting in on the Nordic noir act, with its own islands standing in for the fjords and forests of Scandinavian crime fiction. The show proved that Britain didn't need to borrow Scandinavia's landscape. It had its own, just off the north coast of Scotland. Fact 3. Filming was a genuine logistical nightmare. Bringing a full television production to one of the most remote parts of the United Kingdom presented challenges that most British dramas never have to consider. Producer Sue de Beauvoir has described the process of transporting cast and crew to the islands as a huge logistical challenge. The biggest ever drama production to be shot in Shetland at the time. Equipment, catering, accommodation, and transport all had to be organized for a location that most television productions would never consider viable. The gamble paid off. The dramatic authenticity that came from actually filming on the islands, rather than substituting a more convenient mainland location, became one of the show's defining strengths. Fact 4. A Hollywood-style star was installed, then removed. In one of the more unusual tributes in British television history, a Hollywood-style star was installed outside a house in Lerwick, Shetland's capital, to honor the show and its lead actor. It was removed 3 months later, following a disagreement with the property owner. The details of the dispute were never widely publicized, but the incident captured something distinctly British about the whole affair: an enthusiastic tribute, a practical disagreement, and a quiet, undramatic resolution that involved simply taking the star away again. Fact 5. Douglas Henshall won a BAFTA for the role. Douglas Henshall played Dr. Jimmy Perez for 7 series, from the show's debut in 2013 until his departure in 2022. His performance earned him the BAFTA Scotland Award for Best Actor, recognition that placed Shetland among the most critically respected dramas in Scottish television. The show itself won Best TV Drama at the 2016 BAFTA Scotland Awards. Henshall's portrayal of Perez, quiet, stoical, carrying visible weight from his character's past, became the defining performance of the show's first 7 series, and the character that most casual viewers still associate with Shetland today. Fact 6. Douglas Henshall left at the peak of the show's success. When Douglas Henshall announced his departure ahead of the 7th series, he was not leaving a struggling show. He was leaving one that BBC executives described as being in rude health. Henshall explained his reasoning simply. He wanted to explore other acting opportunities after playing the same character for nearly a decade. He spoke warmly about the privilege of the role and his connection to Shetland itself, saying he would miss both the character and the islands that had shaped the show's identity. Executive producer Gaynor Holmes credited Henshall's sensitive and memorable portrayal with helping the show grow from strength to strength across 7 series, while confirming the show would continue without him. Subscribe if you want more. There's plenty more where this came from. Fact 7. Gemma Chan appeared before global stardom. The very first Shetland production, a two-part adaptation of Anne Cleeve's novel Red Bones, broadcast in 2013 before the show became a full series, featured a young actress named Gemma Chan in a significant role as archaeologist Hattie James. Chan went on to become one of the most recognizable faces in global cinema, starring in Crazy Rich Asians and playing Cersei in Marvel's Eternals. She appeared in Shetland's very first production, playing a character who discovers a mysterious skeleton on the islands years before Hollywood came calling. Fact 8. Brian Cox played a reclusive murder suspect. In Series 2, Succession star Brian Cox joined the cast as Magnus Bane, a reclusive Shetland resident who becomes a murder suspect when a body is discovered near his home. Cox has described the character as a simple man who has lived by simple means, deliberately cutting himself off from the rest of the world by choice. This was years before Cox became globally famous as Logan Roy in Succession, one of the most acclaimed television performances of the past decade. Shetland, like so many British detective dramas before it, quietly attracted major acting talent years before the talent became impossible to book. Fact 9. The show transformed tourism to the islands. Visit Scotland has directly credited Shetland with an amazing success in driving tourism to one of the most remote parts of the United Kingdom. Thousands of tourists, many arriving via cruise ships, began traveling to Shetland specifically because of the show's popularity. For an archipelago that had never previously been a significant tourist destination, the impact was substantial and sustained across the show's entire run. The dramatic scenery that made the show visually distinctive, the very thing that made filming so logistically difficult, became, once broadcast, the single biggest driver of tourism the islands had ever experienced. Fact 10. The lead character was replaced by his own sergeant. When Douglas Henshall departed after Series 7, the production made a deliberate creative choice. Rather than simply casting a new detective, the show promoted an existing character. Alison O'Donnell, who had played D.S. Tosh McIntosh since the very first series, took over as the show's lead investigator from Series 8 onwards, initially working alongside newly introduced D.I. Ruth Calder, played by Ashley Jensen. The transition mirrored almost exactly what had happened when Inspector Morse became Inspector Lewis, the loyal supporting officer stepping up to lead, rather than an entirely new character being parachuted in. Fact 11. Ashley Jensen was cast as a Shetland-born detective. Ashley Jensen, best known internationally for Extras and Ugly Betty, joined Shetland from Series 8 as D.I. Ruth Calder, a detective born on the islands who returns home to solve a case and ends up staying permanently. Jensen is herself Scottish, born in Annan in Dumfries and Galloway. Her casting brought a genuine connection to the character's backstory, an actress with authentic Scottish roots playing a detective whose entire arc is built around returning home to a place she thought she had left behind. Fact 12. The show doesn't adapt individual novels anymore. In its earliest series, Shetland closely followed individual Anne Cleeve's novels, each series roughly corresponding to one book. As the show has continued past the point where Cleeve's existing novels could sustain it, the production team has taken a different approach. Recent series, including the 11th, expand the world of Cleeve's characters rather than adapting specific books. The historic murder investigation at the center of Series 11, beginning with skeletal remains discovered in a car pulled from the water, was developed independently, using the tone and characters Cleeve's created without being tied to a specific existing plot. Fact 13. The show has run for over a decade with no end in sight. Shetland debuted in 2013. By the time Series 10 aired on BBC One in November 2025, the show had already been renewed for an 11th series, with filming confirmed as underway shortly afterwards. Across more than a decade, the show has survived a complete change of lead actor, adapted its approach to storytelling once the source novels were exhausted, and continued drawing audiences across the UK and internationally. Few British detective dramas achieve this level of longevity while maintaining consistent critical and audience regard throughout. Fact 14. The real community embraced the attention. Unlike some filming locations that have grown weary of tourist attention, Shetland's relationship with the show that made it famous has remained largely positive across more than a decade of production. Local actor Stephen Robertson, who has played forensic scientist Sandy Wilson since the very first series, described working on his home islands as a dream come true, something he had hoped for throughout his entire professional career. His presence in the cast, alongside the broader production's continued investment in the islands, has helped maintain the sense that Shetland is not simply exploiting its setting, but genuinely representing it. Fact 15. Anne Cleeves created 2 franchises from one set of islands. Anne Cleeves' connection to Shetland runs deeper than simply writing the source novels. She has spoken about what first motivated her to set her stories on the islands and why they continue to hold a special place in her heart, a personal connection that predates the television adaptation entirely. From that personal connection, Cleeves built not just a series of novels, but an entire television franchise that has now run for over a decade, survived a complete cast change, adapted itself beyond the source material, and continues to draw audiences across the UK and around the world. One writer's fascination with a remote Scottish archipelago became one of British television's most enduring and internationally successful crime dramas, running alongside her equally successful Vera franchise, as proof that Anne Cleeves understood something essential about what audiences want from a detective story. And those are 15 shocking facts about one of British television's most atmospheric and quietly successful detective dramas. A show that turned isolation into its greatest strength, launched future Hollywood stars, and is still, over a decade later, finding new mysteries on the same remote islands. If you are a true Shetland fan, this channel was made for you. Subscribe, and we will see you next time.